Welcome to week 6. Here we are just a couple weeks out from finishing up this course on nonprofit social media and marketing. I wanted to take just a few minutes to talk to you about this week's module. You may have noticed I did not have a video recorded set of notes or even a mini lecture last week. That's because I was working feverishly to grade your social media marketing plans. I really wanted to get feedback to you as quickly as possible, knowing that many of you are going to be integrating in to your final plan what you discovered as part of your social media plan. So we're back to a more normal structure for this week. Let's talk a minute about the way this week is going to play out. So, unlike weeks in the past where you have had discussion boards on this topic, you have the readings, chapters 3 and 6 in Weimer, plus a couple of blog posts on creating press releases, creating public service announcements. But we're really focusing on the topic of publicity in nonprofit organizations and utilizing that as a strategy of communications. So this week I decided to structure things just a tad bit differently. You will have an assignment due on Tuesday by 11:59 p.m. Central Time. That assignment is to write a press release for an organization of your choice. My recommendation is that you would pick the organization that you're working on your final project for. And by this point in time, you probably have some familiarity with that organization. And so you know of either an upcoming event or a program that's ongoing, some component of that organization that you feel like you could write a release that would be a little easier than doing research to write a release. So that would be my thought process on that. So that's due Tuesday, 11:59 p.m. The follow-up to that is that you are being asked to peer review one other student's press release, and that is due by Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. So just one other one. I would invite you to be looking for not only the content of the press release, but also the format. Is it formatted properly based on journalistic standards on writing a press release? And submitting that type of feedback, not only to the student who wrote it, but then also for me to view as well. Moving forward, on Thursday at 11:59 p.m., you have an assignment due of creating a public service announcement. And I have twofold expectation for that. One, you would actually write a written public service announcement that would likely be submitted to a radio station or to a television station. But then I'm also asking you to get behind your smartphone or your webcam on your computer or computer in a lab on campus, wherever you can find access to a webcam and a mic, and actually record a 30-second public service announcement for a message related to the organization of your choice. So you're not only going to write a public service announcement, but you're going to actually create one behind the camera. And then the fourth component of this week is that, again, you're going to be asked to go in and peer review one other student's public service announcement assignment. Again, looking for content, looking for formatting. So let's take a minute to also discuss if you have questions about this specific topic. I am going to go in and create a discussion board topic for questions about publicity or questions about press releases and public service announcements. So not a discussion board topic, not required to post. But I would highly recommend that each of you that are starting to maybe wrestle with some questions about the differences between press releases and public service announcements, or the difference between formatting those documents, may want to tune into that discussion board. I'll be watching that very closely and will be answering as quickly as possible, knowing that you have tight timelines this particular week on your assignments and on the feedback. And that will give you a venue for me to broadly answer questions rather than answering emails in a one-off fashion. That doesn't mean if you email me that I won't get back in touch with you, but I would recommend that everybody go in and subscribe to that forum discussion board post so you can see when questions are being asked in that like frequently asked questions thread that I'm going to create. Okay, so just a few minutes to talk briefly for those of you that have never worked with press releases and public service announcements. They are indeed different. One key factor to remember is that press releases are written to be read. Okay, so it's all about column spacing and printing, right? So it's a newspaper, it's all about column width, the number of words and placement in that way. Public service announcements are written to be heard or seen, so they're for radio or television. In that world, it's all about time, right? So when you think about a radio station and trying to fit a public service announcement in, everything has increments usually in 15 to 30-second time frames. Same with a television station. It's very imperative that you understand the difference between the two. I have found through the years when I worked at WBAA Public Radio that nonprofit organizations would often submit to me a press release. But a press release is not formatted in such a way that I could turn around and immediately put that into what's called the log. A log is what's used in radio and television to direct the traffic, which is another key word in that kind of world. In terms of what you say when on the air, right? And when do you move back into nationally syndicated programming, and when do you pop out for breaks and all of that. And it's timed. So a couple of thoughts about this. When it comes to press releases, you're more limited in terms of the number of words or what would fit within that particular publication's needs to fill that particular press release out. So either it would need to be edited down, or if it fits just right, it would be printed as is, or an editor may even call the person submitting the press release and say, I'd have some additional questions, and would try to fill out a story to bring in a feature story. On the flip side, with the public service announcement, the goal is again to impart information about the nonprofit organization, but it's meant to be done in a way where it's all about time. So whereas a press release would say for immediate release, July 16, 2018, a public service announcement is going to say for immediate release, July 16, 2018 through August 1st, 2018, right? So the idea is your message is going to run from a start point to stop point, whereas you'd never include that in a press release. A couple of other key differences. Press releases are written in typical upper and lowercase format, usually single spaced. Again, being ready to be put into a written to be printed format. Public service announcements, on the other hand, are always written in all capital letters with double spacing. And for those of you that might be asking why, I can personally attest to the fact it is much easier to read information from a traffic log on the air that is in all capital letters and double spaced. So when you submit this information to a local television station and it's not a video PSA, it's just simply the written version, and you're hoping they pick it up and create a B-roll off, then the idea would be that you're writing it in a way that it would get dropped right into their logs, particularly for radio stations. For your component of the assignment where you're creating a video PSA, your goal is to try and create that PSA that you've written timed out so it fits in that 30-second spot. So making sure that you've written the right amount of information, that you're reading at a proper cadence, and that you're also considering the fact that, let's say it's intended for a radio listener, you would maybe even consider repeating information, such as if there's a call to action where there may be a phone number, you might repeat that early in the PSA for information and then again at the close. You would never do that in a press release because it would appear to be redundant. Another thought would be, think of something like your website. In a written press release, it's simply going to be printed the way that we would type out a website address, you know. Let me think, boomerangbackpacks.org. Okay, so one of my clients that I work with. However, in a public service announcement, it'd be written out in all caps, boomerangbackpacks.dot.org. Again, readability for the individual that you're asking to use that information and air as a PSA. So hopefully these are a few ideas just to give you a sense for differences in format that you could be looking for. Let me also talk briefly about what's called the inverted pyramid structure. Okay, so most of your important details at the very top of your document. And as your document closes out, these are substantiating details that are of less and less and less of importance, okay? So a press release and a public service announcement are usually trying to answer the questions of who the organization is, what the message is or what they're trying to accomplish, um, who they're trying to reach broadly. You know, is it a program? Are they trying to reach kids? Is it an event? Are they looking to invite the community? When is this taking place? Maybe even why, particularly if it's an event and you want to answer the question of this is a main fundraiser for this organization, that answers that why. And in some ways, how. So, for instance, you may, in the very top of a press release, identify several of those key components in that first paragraph. Then, as you work down through a press release, it might have information with a quote from the executive director, which, by the way, is the only place in a press release or public service announcement that you may use subjective information, not objective, right? And also then maybe the line under that might identify some sponsors of the organization, etc. So the whole idea is you're making sure that the very most important information is captured at the top so that if media decide to shorten up your release, they're making sure to include those very key details that you ultimately want to make sure get imparted to an audience. Well, another thought would be think about the language that you're using when you work with press releases and public service announcements. Important to be very concise. That can be incredibly difficult for someone who's articulate and very verbose. I know I fall into that particular category. You really need to bring your writing down to a level where it's very concise and very objective. You also want to avoid using a lot of acronyms and jargon. Simply because you've got to remember that the majority of your audience may not identify with that information. Well, there'll be a discussion board. If you have questions that emerge as you jump into this assignment once you finish your reading, please do post on that discussion board so that the majority of your classmates may also get the benefit of some of the answers, and or so that you as colleagues of one another who may also understand or know the answer to some of those may jump in and say, oh yes, on this, the answer would be blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I'm really encouraging you to help answer one another, while certainly I will also be monitoring that. And I would also encourage you to go in and subscribe to the thread so that you're aware of the fact when somebody's made a post. If you have a question, there's a good chance maybe someone else in the class also has a question. So enjoy week 6. We're going to trailblaze through this. And if you have any questions, use the discussion board, send me a message to Blackboard or send an email. Have a great week. And thank you very much for your time and attention.